Thank you guys. Thank you for joining for another session of the Chicago booth webinars. And we're trying to see, Tuesdays would be a consistent day for us to sort of maintain these webinars so that everybody sort of can join in right after Monday. Join us for a good knowledge session, good info sharing session as well. Today we have Indranil with us, who has done the full-time program from Chicago booth. And I think the interesting story to say today is, and ended up creating one of the biggest healthcare professionals network in this part of the world. So he's got about 200,000 doctors. So the platform is mainly to the doctors where they're able to talk to each other and share information, share a lot of knowledge sharing. Just like what we're doing in the booth as well, and very specific to the doctors in this case. And I'm thankful for Indranil, who's taken the time to share a few slides with us, as well as share his journey through the process from, just sort of an idea. I mean, like many of us have ideas, but there are very few of us who actually take the ideas and make that into a reality. So how many years has it been, Indranil, so far for you?
Actually about what, four years now since we started. I think the conceptualization started quite some time back, but I think real feet on the ground started 2015, November 2015. So yeah, approximately four.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. Right. Okay. Without further ado, let me hand this over to you. I think we can do a lot more Q&A towards the end. So the session's yours. Please go ahead and share your info with us.
Great. Thank you, Anand. Just let me share this. Okay. Thank you. So, I just, one of the core things that I think learned over the last 5 years specifically was how do you explain things simply, and believe me, it's still probably the most difficult thing for me to still do, to be able to kind of take down, break down what we are doing, and specifically talk about a little bit about what Docquity is and what our long-term vision is. And the objective today that I wanted to kind of share very simply was basically, in a nutshell, try to explain, what we are doing as a company, how we started, but most importantly, in this part two, take you a little bit through the journey from where we started, with GNVC, and how an idea started to get supported by multiple people, our investors, the team, shareholders, our first users, and basically talk about some of the stories that actually has got us to where we are right now. But to begin with, I think when we looked at, it's not that, when we started to, think about a business problem, to solve for the GNVC, and everything was, clear. But the real aspect was, there was a kind of a personal incident that I had gone through back in 2011, and which concerned my dad. He was misdiagnosed by a very, very senior cardiologist, in the country. And, during that scenario, one of the younger cardiologists, he actually came up to my mom and he signed up a consent form. And he tried one of the most weirdest treatment practices that I've seen. And he injected a pill which was supposed to be taken as 20 milligrams. That was intravenously injected into my dad. But my dad actually recovered from there, and he went on to live for another 6-7 years. And then I actually spoke to the doctor, saying, while the senior cardiologist just walked off, saying that this particular patient might not be able to survive the day, what made you do this? And one of the things that really got me interested, he said that he had actually called up one of his peers, back in Santa Clara, and these guys had a discussion around this kind of a case, and he said, why don't we why don't we start, why don't you try this out and see what happens? And he tried that out. This is not a documented treatment procedure. He actually tried that out. And my father was able to live for the next 7 years. And, what, at that point, nothing really struck out as an opportunity or a business, really. But this thing was very clearly imprinted in my mind as, how can a life be dependent on a phone call? What if that doctor in Santa Clara was not available? And that's where when we started, I was really interested to kind of get inside the healthcare space, because and the thought process was, we are spending so much time on social networks like Facebook, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, and so many other things. We are discussing that, we are checking into restaurants. And the whole concept was, why can't we take this entire situation and bring it back to doctors within the medical regulations, wherein these doctors can actually have these conversations on a much more regular basis, and lives do not need to get dependent upon that phone call. And I think that's where we really looked at as to how the doctor-patient relationship really works. But when we started to dig down deeper into this, doctor-patient relationship, and we saw the healthcare ecosystem, especially in Southeast Asia and almost all of the other regions, we saw there were so many startups who were really trying to, digitize this space. And when we started, as a company, for us to create that ecosystem without either having an ownership of the doctor or of the patient, and as a startup, I thought, it would have been very, very difficult for us to start getting an imprint, within this particular ecosystem. And then we started to look slightly behind. And what we figured out was, when we looked at healthcare, it's such a complex ecosystem with pharma industries, the hospitals, life insurance, corporates, all getting involved. And we figured out that this is where the biggest challenge really lies, because so many people are trying to get the attention of the doctor. And they're all trying to do this in a very, very, different or, their own mechanisms. And when we kind of looked at this entire ecosystem, one of the core things that came to our minds was, we can actually turn this need of collaborations of doctors within each other into one single business, and that's what Docquity really did. We started to focus on aggregating and getting these doctors to start to collaborate, through a typical social media feel or a social network feel, and made it regulated with respect to the industry medical regulations. And essentially, that's how the whole concept around Docquity really started, from getting 2 or 3 doctors to integrate, and now we have been lucky enough to be able to kind of build out a platform wherein the end-to-end collaborations that these doctors are doing, the 200,000 doctors on our platform, as Anand mentioned, and they're discussing this, on their real-time clinical cases on a much regular basis. And we didn't try to really reinvent, what these social medias are doing, but what we were clear that, doctors need to engage, and this has to be exclusively for doctors. I really fundamentally believed in the concept of having, niche professional networks. This is the next wave that's going to really, happen with LinkedIn's, Facebook's, looking at the consumer market and the professional market. And that's where we always wanted to kind of go over for that, create that niche network where we can really create that closed user group of doctors in the network, in the region. And we started in Indonesia in 2016 when we launched. And from there to now, Docquity is right now in across 7 countries in Southeast Asia. We have also launched our services in Bangladesh and Pakistan, other than Southeast Asia as well, with close to around 202,000 doctors on the platform who have actually managed to create this into, the probably one of the most dominant medical networks in the region. And now we are also integrating allied healthcare professionals. We are now working with the medical associations, dealing with the nursing or the pharmacists, the pharmacists and the nurses, etc., coming onto this platform again. So I think from the start point, one of the core things that we really had to do was really to be able to build out a network, wherein these doctors were engaging, and we still didn't have a real revenue model in place. And I think I'm talking as close to 2018. That's 3 years once we had launched the Docquity application. We really didn't have a single dollar in revenue. But the core thing that we focused on as an organization was that, and one of the inspirations always comes from, if you see the LinkedIn Series B pitch, which is freely available in the, on the internet. He talks about, Reef Oldman talks about the same thing. The focus, they went on focus on creating their network, and then the revenue model started to kind of escalate from this core network itself. And that's how Docquity also has now started to kind of expand its revenue model. And the way we saw this is, becoming the dominant network, which is still growing at a very rapid pace, within the region. We looked at existing business models again, and we looked at how the interactions were happening physically. And essentially what we did was what we looked at from a B2B side of things. We started to engage with the pharma industry, the hospitals, the insurance industries, and who were then able to take their physical or their manual interactions with the doctor, replicate the Facebook kind of an environment, Facebook kind of a business model, where these guys could actually start talking to the doctors. And then on the patient side, instead of the typical telemedicine where patients come in, they search a portal, what we essentially did was very simple. We created a Zoom type link, which is a Docquity. It's not Zoom, especially it's a proprietary technology, but we gave a link, a personalized link to all the individual doctors, on our platform. All the 200,000 doctors had their own personal teleconsulting link, through which they started to create their own patient networks. So we took the business model away from from creating these basically focusing on the network that we had built, and that's how Docquity started to monetize initially from the B2B segment in 2019, and now in 2020 we have just launched our B2C segment, again leveraging the networks that we have. And it's while it has been very slow to kind of initially adopt, because it was kind of a new category that we were trying to create. But actually, with COVID, many of those adoption barriers have actually gone down, and almost 20 of the top global pharmas and across various categories, and even some of the insurance companies have really started to work with us. So I think it's still quite early in what we are essentially trying to achieve, and the roadmap through what we had thought of. But I think I was having a chat with Anand, and quickly a couple of things we wanted to kind of take you through. While the business side of things is more easier to explain. I really wanted to share my own personal journey, which essentially the name Docquity, it actually came up during the GNVC days, and that's the team. I'm from the AXP 13 batch. We were one of the last batches to graduate, from the Singapore campus, and those 2 years I can still, it was nothing that when I joined Booth, there was none of the whole concept around Docquity really was not in my mind. Yes, I wanted to do something, but it was never in my mind to do something what Docquity's actually turned out to be. But during the GNVC days, it was fascinating, because here in our group itself, you had the head of the country manager of HP China, or an investment banker, a private equity banker, all coming together, to basically talk about this whole concept around Docquity, and it just gave so much more freedom to, from a small perspective that I was thinking, and it just kind of exploded to what all we could do. And especially, preparing those Excel sheets, the presentations, creating and fabricating that business model, to what it can become. was essentially done during those, I think those last 6 months where the GNVC started. And we actually participated. We qualified for the finals in the US, in Chicago, and I think in Chicago we got the third position for GNVC 14, if I remember correctly. But the real realization that happened right after that was, while the business model was ready, everything was ready. Right after GNVC and after Booth, when we started, everything stopped. We never had thought about execution. We never had thought about things which probably we don't learn in an MBA. And when we do things on the ground, we learn. That's the story that we started to follow was execution is your new IP. And that's something that we have learned in every single step of the journey that we did. Yes, the team I continued to keep actually take Docquity live. I was joined by my co-founder, and a couple of realizations that happened through us in each of these stages. And the first thing that kind of was very, very important was, we build a lot of products. There was a theory of how we want to build. There was a lot of use cases, but the team to really build that was probably one of the most fundamental things. And the same guys who actually we were about a four-member company at that point of time are still with the company. They're actually leading their own teams. And one of the things that was really intriguing was whatever we had built over the years, it has gone through a complete change. But the philosophy through which the team actually started to look at the product from day one, which was essentially available because we had done a lot of those research during the GNVC days, was probably one of the most helpful features that we were able to kind of continue. And it was not just around the building out the product. This picture kind of reminds me of another one of those interesting stories. This is Amit. He's the co-founder of the company. And while we had this revenue projections, we had when we are going to get EBITDA positive, we had all those plans in mind. But then we started out, the first thing, the only target that we had in mind was this is Amit sitting outside the Medical Association of Indonesia. He's talking to a doctor. That's a doctor there. With the single objective that we had in our mind is that these doctors has to be on our WhatsApp list. We need to be able to communicate with that doctor straight and ensure, and get the feedback from how they want their particular product to be. And in fact, even today, we have been able to build out these user groups of doctors who are basically, giving us this feedback. And they just don't give a feedback. They just blast us, saying that, guys, you got to do this or this is not working, etc. And that's how essentially, we were able to build out a product that is now sufficing, over 200,000. That's 50% of the doctors in Southeast Asia region. And now we're expanding outside of Southeast Asia into markets like Korea or Turkey, for example. And we are a Booth community. A lot of these, investment discussions or the financial discussions happen. And we have gone through a full raise of. We did our seed in 2016. We did our Series A in 2018. Our Series B in 2019, and now we are doing our Series C as we speak. But still, it was not the whole journey wherein you talk about valuations and stuff like that. But there are a couple of things that kind of come out through these investor relationships and these journeys that at least personally I have felt through. We've been lucky enough to have kind of a varied set of investors, from Japan, from US, and I still remember going over to these guys saying, I have 1 month of runway left. What do I do? I still remember this incident where Spiral Ventures, Genesia Ventures, there's both Japan-based funds, and we were actually drinking with them in Jakarta. And it's over 1 a.m. or 2 p.m., 2 a.m. Late call through. They actually got their managing directors on the call late in the night, and they pulled together an investment, less than 24 hours. And those are things that we learned, specifically, that it's not just about term sheets. It's not just about giving the reports back to these guys. These guys are individuals as well. If you can share a beer together with them, if you can really maintain that relationship, these are the guys that can really pull you out when you are in real issue. And we were not able to pay salaries to our team for 4 months. And the investor who was supposed to come in this round had given us one of the most funniest term sheets that I've ever seen in my life, one of the most complicated term sheets that I've ever seen in my life, and we didn't want to take that deal. And it's one month, 1 week of runway left, and these guys pulled it together. And that's why I kind of keep on going back to this concept, to this journey specifically, wherein it's not just about building out the business model, building out our revenue forecast, building out the product. It's more about the relationships that we try to build out at a very ground level basis, and that's what has been fundamental, in how we have grown. Those investors were our Series A investors. When we moved on to the Series B, we started to partner with some of the bigger companies, and these are billion-dollar companies: Zuellig Pharma, Itochu, Japanese $45 billion dollar company, and we were nothing in front of them. But again, one of the feedbacks, when we talk to some of the other entrepreneurs, is whenever they look at corporate VCs, sometimes the corporate funding, once investment is done, then it takes them a lot of time to kind of move. But again, the whole concept of individual relationships kind of matter. The way we kind of saw ourselves with Zuellig or even with Itochu was specifically, it's not the company which is investing in us. It was those individuals. Benjamin Below from Zuellig Pharma, or these guys, these individuals who actually believed in what Docquity did, are the guys who are investing. And when we were struggling to actually monetize our application, it was these guys with all their domain expertise who actually helped us to start, pitching in front of these, big pharma companies who are our clients today. And I remember the first pitch that we did to one of the clients. That same client is already running services with us in, across 7 countries. And it's not that, a lot of these ideas and thoughts processes came in through, what we thought as founders. No, I think it was more coming from these guys who had the expertise, but I think the only thing right that we were able to do, and across this entire journey, was to be able to keep those individual relationships, and that put that respect within that individual relationships. The relationship between an investor or a startup or those within the team change. It was really those guys that kind of helped us to kind of move to where we are. And I think that's in a nutshell, that's how the Docquity's journey really has been. We knew what we wanted to do, but when we started to launch, the execution is completely different. We have seen some horrid times wherein we used to get about 3 or 4 doctors joining us in a month. And today we are getting more than somewhere around 2% of the market. We are acquiring doctors at the rate of 2% of market penetration. So I think the only learning that I have is internally, while we believe the markets are completely different, and to be able to take an idea from where we were at that point of time, creating a complete new category to where we are at this point, I think 3 things have really helped us. Number 1 was obviously the execution, our ability to be able to understand what it needs to execute. The second one was really these partnerships that kind of came together. And finally, I think the most important point specifically is when we looked at health tech, it cannot be compared to some of the other industries. It cannot be compared to a consumer industry. It cannot be compared to an e-commerce industry. It takes time. What has worked for us right now is that the investors and investing community is beginning to understand that, and the partnerships that we have been able to create with respect to the investor and the client community understands that, and that is where it's given us the patience to be able to grow where we are right now. So Anand, I think that's in a very short nutshell what I wanted to share. Anything you guys have in mind, please, I'll be happy to answer.
Hey, thanks for that info session. I think that was really good. I think the biggest challenge, you know, when we talk about healthcare, and I'm here in healthcare as well, I do a lot of deployments for healthcare organizations, hospitals, where we bring digital transformations to hospitals. I mean, we deployed basically new ways of payment, gateway systems. We deployed telemedicine related solutions, online solutions, e-commerce based platforms in the last 90 days. I mean, some of this was executed in the literally in the last 90 days. COVID-19, basically what it said is everybody needs to wake up. The old ways of reaching out to a doctor is not the same. You got to change, you got to move, you got to bring new things. Based on that, you know, the hospitals here, particularly, you know, the doctors were reluctant before, oh, I can't see the patient. How do I sort of know exactly how the patient is? Yes, there are certain scenarios where you can't do an operate on a patient, but for most non-communicable disease cases, I think you could still do consultations, medication refill can be done, all of that. So coming back to how you guys started, I think some of the things that you mentioned was you had about 200,000 doctors. So was this over a period of how long? You know, how long did you guys take to get over 200,000 doctors on your network?
I think the initial phase, as I mentioned, you know, it was interesting because we got to about 30,000 doctors in 3 years, 100,000 doctor in the next 1.5 years, and then the next 100,000 doctors actually came to us in the last 6 months. So I think the aspect was it was very difficult for us to initially start differentiating from a typical social network, you know, and justify why this use case is important. But you know, we were able to figure out some new use cases along the way, like online courses or master classes and stuff like that, which actually helped us to acquire these doctors. And from where the early adopters moved on to the discussion piece, which is the core of the application.
Right. So when you talk about education, I think that's an important one. So what kind of learning is going on in the platform today?
So I think there's two sets of learning. I think when you look at doctors, I think and Anand would understand this. You know, they will just do what is, you know, from an academic perspective, they will just do what is exactly needed. So I think the new doctors, they are doing many of these courses, etc. But one of the things we learned very early in the game is you know, the practical discussions is the part which is missing, the practical collaboration. So for example, now we have these kind of, let's say we have this you know, psoriatic arthritis case group, wherein, you know, the younger doctors are actually posting some of their patient cases, and the senior doctors who are, you know, dermatologists or guys who are looking at psoriasis, these are specialists who are actually working with those younger GPs, and they are taking them through the case, saying, you know, this is what we would have done. Do you want to take that? Okay, go take this investigation. And they come back and say, okay, we have done that. This is the result. Okay, this might be the next way of treatment. And the good thing, it's the network is auto-regulated, because it's not just one doctor giving his dictum, because his line of treatment is also available for multiple of the other doctors to kind of say and comment. And that's why the treatment lines gets multiple, and we get that crowdsourced opinion going into that individual doctor who's looking at that patient at that point of time. So that's where I fundamentally believe is where the learning is coming from.
I mean, you also mentioned recently, I think on one of your LinkedIn posts, I saw that you had about 5,000 doctors who attended one of your webinars. So was that like a pure doctor knowledge sharing session, or what was that typically discussion points? Was it like an education sharing, or it's a general overview?
Yeah. No, I think one of the that was interesting, because you know, right, the doctors love their conventions, they love their physical meetings and you know, those events, etc. that is being hosted. And one of the things that COVID did was it stopped all those meetings and events from happening. So we were anyway streaming all those events live, and then we started to say, okay, hey, this is a new way of engaging these doctors, and why don't we do everything on Docquity? And that's where we started to move all the medical conventions, the seminars, etc., live on the Docquity application. And yes, this varies. This was, I think, the one that you're talking about was with the Philippines College of Surgeons. This was about 5,000 surgeons from Philippines coming together on the Docquity platform over a period of 2 days. Very recently, we did with the Cancer Society. That was actually over 5 days. But it's about various topics. Yes, there are some practical aspects that these doctors are sharing, but it also cases where they are talking about some of these guys actually did live surgeries. They show recording of live surgeries that they have done and what was the issue out there, and the doctors were able to kind of go through this on a navigated basis. And our whole idea was, whatever way of engagement we can do with the doctor, I think Docquity is going to go for that. So that's that was a COVID impact. We just were able to kind of pull the roadmap much faster during the COVID period.
Right. Okay. So I think, for the guys who have actually tuned in, I think you can start your Q&A sessions. You can actually type in your questions, what you would like to be answered, and I'll definitely get to each of those. So let me start, I think, with a question from Hipaa and also Alka from India. And I think they have a question that overlaps with each other, which is basically monetization and how do you charge for service?
Okay, so our monetization is right now, the monetization is twofold, as I mentioned. On the B2B side, what we do is we have created something like, think about it like a YouTube channel. It's not about advertising. It's not about, we don't allow advertising on our platform. But what we have done is essentially we have created like YouTube channels where where these pharmas actually have their own real estate. It's all about the scientific, it's like a digital MSL, which is talking about the scientific things, and the doctors subscribe to these channels on the Docquity application, and we charge the pharma on a subscription model on a per doctor basis. So that's how we charge for different specializations, etc. From the pharmaceuticals, we do not allow any kind of branded advertising on the product, on the application. The other side, where the doctors are teleconsulting with the patients, we are charging the doctors a monthly subscription fee, with respect to that particular teleconsulting on the private network, based on the number of patients he is building onto his personal network. So it's a very platform driven. So from one side, we are charging a subscription model based on the number of doctors. On the doctor side, we are charging a subscription model based on the number of patients he's getting in.
Right. So that's interesting. So I think which leads to the pharma question. So let me take another question from Hipaa again. So does pharma usually cover the cost for doctors, or the doctors are paying by themselves?
So our network is, think about us very similar to how LinkedIn grew, right? So for the professionals individually, we are exactly like LinkedIn. It's free to join for the doctors. And we focus on activities and organic sharing from our own doctors, which actually helps us to get more of these doctors. So the pharma doesn't pay for any of these doctors. The pharmas only have the right to create their channels, these content channels on the applications, and their programs on the applications through which the doctors can organically subscribe to. And we take all the consents from the doctor saying that, do you want to do this or not? And one of the advantages initially when we started out looking at the model, we had this doubt about what if we are looked at, we are doing, pharma branding or advertising, all of those kind of questions kind of came in because of the ethical issues. But one of the stories, which again, I go back to these stories, is one of our first clients, he actually went to a medical association and said, why we are trying to do this with Docquity? Do you think this is a good platform? Do you think we should be in there? And the only reason the medical association said that I would like you to go to Docquity because they are brand neutral, because they're going to be working with every pharma. and we didn't think about it from that perspective. And that took that entire issue out because this is not something that we are pushing to doctors. This is a doctors subscribing. This is doctors pulling. It's like a pull from the doctors rather than a content push from the doctors, which has been a typical traditional method of engaging with doctors, right?
Right. Leading question to, I think, Hyun Park. I think she's studying medicine. So she's asking, do you only open for doctors, but also are you open for medical students as well?
We have some selective groups of medical students. Right now, Docquity is really focusing on the doctors. We are a professional network of verified doctors. But we are coming out with, Docquity replicas, if you want to call it, like for medical students, for nurses, for midwives, and pharmacists. It's separate applications, but for students can also interact with their senior doctors on our platform. It's the same database. You can still have those interactions. And basically, we are trying to foster the practical academy. So we call it the digital academy internally, the digital university internally, where the senior doctors can actually create their own student groups and be able to focus more on the practical side of learning, on the practical side of case diagnosis, rather than just the the academics part, which the university is anyway doing.
Right. So I think, so switching back from Hyun Park, I'm going back to Alka Singh. She's also asking, what are the advantages of the doctors to be on your network, right? And why does pharma companies, what is the pull for pharma companies, a captive audience for pitching their products? Because I think, like in Malaysia, what I remember is whenever we're actually trying to promote a service, what we do is we actually have a session with the doctors of each hospital. So it's usually either a monthly thing or a quarterly once. We actually meet all the doctors. We talk about all the new services, promote all the new services. Is that something that's happening with you as well?
I think let's break it down into two aspects. I think what's in it for the doctors is simple. So as I said, initially it took us more than 3 years to get about 30,000 doctors, right? And that's obviously because we were trying to go over the hump. We were trying to explain the use case. And sometimes luck helps, right? So what happened was, this continuing medical education became mandatory for the doctors in Southeast Asia. And many doctors were not able to get their physical certificates done because there was no digital platform and no real platform available in that. So Docquity quickly transformed its use case, saying that, we are going to do this digital online courses, and we use that as a hook. To get these doctors, and the doctors were quickly able to get their CME credits. But we always understood that, the CME things and these courses, etc., are all transactional. So then we slowly started to move these doctors into this case discussion, and now it's become a network. So the advantage of a network, as we all understand, is that it's fundamentally grows from the concept of network effects. So now when you see, 5 of our peers, let's say they're sharing a case on Docquity on their WhatsApp group, you click on that and you say, hey, you've got 7 or 8 of the doctors that I know using this platform, and now they join back into the platform. So it's something like, it's now become their ecosystem where they're discussing their cases, they're doing their professional networking, they're doing their online education, etc. And that concept is, for example, if you look at Indonesia, we have close to 85% of the doctors in Indonesia on our platform now, but it took us that many years to get there. Now, from the pharma perspective, I think obviously, pharmas are big companies. They have grown used to certain traditional mechanisms and Anand, as you were saying, like these sessions that they are hosting with doctors. But think about it from a doctor's perspective, and all of us. Think about the 1 hour, 2 hour lectures we used to have back in booth. By the 45th minute, most of us used to switch off, right? Because it was so intense. So what Docquity has essentially done is not only are we bringing out a dominating network or a captive audience users or doctors, but we are also engaging or curating the way these kind of sessions are happening. So for example, we looked at these 1 hour long lectures, and we cut it down into Netflix style episodes called Doc Talks, wherein this entire 1 hour video was cut into 5 minutes, 5 minutes bursts of video, one video getting launched every week. And people were used to that concept of bite-sized learning. It's easier to consume. It's already there on the platform. It's not a transactional thing. And we focused on this, this continual education part of the business. And that's why we are working with so many of these pharmas now.
Okay, I mean, there's a lot of questions, so I think which is actually kind of good because these are important questions. So Derek Mitchell is asking. You mentioned there are numerous groups competing for doctors' attention. How difficult was it to convince the doctors to share their contact details with an unknown startup uh, and get them to share more about what they need? What was your approach? I think this one, in healthcare, I think if you talk about GDPR or any kind of safety or security, so you're always afraid of sharing something, right? While we say that, at the same time, we have violations on WhatsApp when everything is shared, including sometimes patients' data, patients' history, patients' stuff. I mean, like sometimes I'm like, okay, how did you get this data? Please delete it.
No, I think this is one of the most fundamental things. So Derek, and by the way, Derek's my batchmate from ASD.
Okay.
One of the things that we did right from the start was we didn't go to the doctors directly. We went to the medical associations. And we went to the medical associations and we said, okay, guys, we are not going to be integrating or we are not going to be taking this doctor's data. What we are going to be doing is we are going to be integrating into your database. And we are going to ensure that there is there's an encryption key which helps us to identify that these doctors are actual verified doctors. Because it's not just the problem of sharing identity. It's the other bigger problem that we were really facing is what if a guy who's not a doctor enters the platform and starts creating havoc? Docquity will lose Docquity will die that same day. And so that whole concept, we didn't go for the typical Facebook marketing or talking to these doctors. We went to these medical associations. We created a very tightly knit PDP agreement with them. We integrated with their database, and we got our first marketing being done by these medical associations themselves. So that's how we were slowly able to build that trust. One of the we were live. I think with Indonesia, while we were starting to launch in Indonesia. We actually got our first doctor in December 2016. That's like 5 or 6 months after we had done our Indonesian Medical Association contract. So it took us a lot of time to convince about the security aspects. We went through security audits with a lot of these companies on the application and the verification of the doctor, the integrity of the network. I think that is the fundamental aspect to what we, if you ask me, that's a fundamental area we focus on. The moment we have non-doctors in the platform or the security breaches happening on the platform, which can happen, and we are trying to protect ourselves from that, I think that's number one priority for me as within Docquity.
Okay, next is from Saeed Meherrabi. He's asking, did you start with a single subspecialty like cardiology, then scaled up to other specialties? That's the question number one. And what are the most common subspecialty represented in your network?
I think that's a great question. No, I think we did not start with a specific specialty. We wanted to kind of create, we started to work with the national medical associations to which all the doctors were actually members of. And as I said, right, we started out as a generalist application, but now we have been able to create these user groups because now we are working with the specialist medical association, the specialist societies as well. To talk about some common specialty, I think, I think we have a good reach and a good breadth across many of them. Oncologists in the Philippines, we have probably got about 70% of the oncologists in the Philippines who are on our platform. We have close to 60 or 70% of all the gynecologists in the region on our platform. So I think it's pretty varied. And Saeed, we can have a chat later, post this, and I can share some more details with you. In general, obviously, market by market, the GPs versus specialists differ. Like in Indonesia, you'll have more GPs, but in Philippines, in Thailand, in Malaysia, you have more specialists. So that's how the network is structured, actually.
Okay. Okay. Following on to the next one, I have a couple of questions also that I want to ask, but let me ask from Kazuyuki Kuramori. Apologies if I'm butchering anybody's name here. But I think his question was, of course it is unique because I would ask the same thing too. How did you actually get Japanese VCs and companies like Itochu to invest in you? And what was your approach and equity story, especially for the VCs?
Arigatou gozaimasu, Kazu-san. Generally speaking, I think the other things, surprisingly, on our cap table, you would see that yes, there is a lot of Japanese and there is a lot of US ventures, and I think one of the reasons is if you look at Southeast Asia, a concept like this hasn't been really proven, and it's a niche network. And but in Japan, and Kato-san, you must surely be aware about M3 and what M3 has done. Or in the US, people know how Medscape is doing a business where they've been able to create this niche community of doctors and turn themselves into multi-billion-dollar companies, basically focusing on the doctors and the engagement with the doctors. And obviously, we were able to relate that business model, back to our Japanese investors much better. And as I said, we met one of the Japanese investors actually at a party. I didn't even know this guy was an investor, and we had a chat, and he introduced me to his company, and then we were introduced to a bigger Japanese network because we already had a Japanese investor, within our cap table, and he believed in the business, and he's been one of the biggest evangelists for us, taking this concept into Japan. But I think fundamentally, if you look at Southeast Asia, many of the companies are focusing on B2C. And not a lot of companies are looking at this B2B side of the business. And Docquity was slightly different on the B2B side of the business. I think a lot of US companies and a lot of US investors and a lot of Japanese investors look at B2B companies at a much deeper level. And that's why we were able to get a little bit of more traction from them. But I think that's potentially the reason we had someone who spoke for us to the broader Japanese community through where we have been able to create that ecosystem. And we are hoping that we are closing the CVC again with a Japanese lead as well, for this round.
How are you differentiating between your services vis-a-vis other apps like Docs app in India?
I think I wouldn't know a lot about any of these applications that are coming out. I think fundamentally, if you look at how Docquity has grown up and what we have essentially said, is that this is a verified network of doctors. We have ensured that our acquisition cost, if you look at our acquisition cost, it's $6 per doctor. That's what we are spending, and generally that's not where we started, because now the organic referrals within the application is coming more from the individual doctors, and that's why we are at a stage where the network is growing at a much rapid pace, rather than we having to do some kind of external acquisition techniques, at least for the countries that we are in. And we did when we look at DocsApp or some of the other telemedicine companies, the way we kind of focused was not about doctor discovery. We again looked at the doctor to patient relationship, and we said that doctors can start building their own private networks, and that's how the doctors also operate, right? They build when they're in their clinic. If you look at the recurring patients, are the patients, with whom they're taking a phone call, they're having a WhatsApp. You said about the WhatsApp, they're having WhatsApp messages around the patient records. So those are the existing patients that we wanted to bring together. So we're not focusing on millions of patients searching for a doctor and asking a question about, I have fever, is it COVID? But we focused on psychiatry. We focused on, the psychologists who are working with clinical depression patients. And during the COVID period, that became one of the bigger use cases. We focused on endocrinologists who are working with, diabetes, and you do not need to be visiting a doctor for a diabetes checkup every single month if you are having that health tech. And, Anand, you and I had a chat about that. So I think we went in a little bit more specialized way. We started to work with the medical associations. I think they have a very important role to play in our growth as well. And that's why we say that we are a doctor's application. We are not really a patient focused or a patient facing application, which is a little bit more general in nature.
I mean, look, I think the things that you're doing is proper in the sense that, I always go back to healthcare, and health related investments are the slowest moving, partly because it relates to humans. So by talking to the right expertise and bringing them on board, you've actually created a bigger success for your company. Of course, Kazuyuki has so many questions, but I'm going to ask a few more as well. He's also asking, he's currently developing a biotech company specializing in immuno-oncology. Is their platform existing on your, okay, or he's asking on your platform, can he post kind of products we are developing, thereby able to match potential partners? So I think this is more related to a clinical sort of a test scenario.
Yeah, so I think we have done that. We have started to work with enabling phase 3 clinical trials in the region as well with some of these pharmas, where we are actually educating doctors about the trial, and then we are working with the doctors to see what kind of patients would actually fit in within this particular clinical trial. So we have started to work on that particular use case as well. However, in Southeast Asia, we do not have a lot of companies coming out with their own IPs. I think that's where we are getting a lot of these Japanese pharmas to come in and who are basically launching their phase 3 clinical trials in the region. So Kazu-san, yes, we could talk. I think that let's have a separate discussion on that as to how we can facilitate your biotech product.
I mean, one last question from him is, I think speaking about the number of doctors, what enabled you to have such a big number of doctors in your network from multiple countries, what is the motivation of these doctors to be a member of your platform?
I think sometimes it's, at this stage, I think at the earlier stage, it was, as I said, it's difficult, right? It's difficult, but because most of the applications that we launch, you talk about any application, launching a product is easy, but creating that hook is very difficult. So when we went into the market, we thought that, yes, we're going to do this collaboration tool. And the doctors asked me, why do I want to collaborate with other doctors? Or why can't I use WhatsApp? And we didn't have an answer for that because there was no hook into the platform at that stage. As I mentioned, we got lucky. We were talking to these medical associations, and Anand, we brought that topic up. When we started speaking to the medical associations, we got to know there are multiple other things which are important to the user at that point of time, like the continuing medical education courses. And we were able to get that thing very quickly into the market. So the doctors started to join. And now the situation has changed where the doctors are, at least for the markets where we are in, it's like, hey, my friend is on Docquity, let me go and try it out. And then when he sees and he comes and he starts to see, he becomes a monthly average user, he becomes a weekly average user, and that's how we kind of track this. So it's more about being missing out rather than initially it was all about what's the hook. So I think that's how we have replicated to other countries as well. So now any country we go in, we first take over the continuing medical education piece. We ensure there is enough hooks in the platform or transactions available in the platform for the doctors to come and do. Once they do, they've created their CME history. They have invested in the platform, and then they are ready to explore the other use cases, and that's how we have been able to go through that.
Right. I mean, I've actually looked at continuous medical education as a big topic, actually. I think in Malaysia, you're required to do, I think annually or every 2 years, you have to do a CME certification course. So what you're actually trying to tell me is every medical doctors to keep up with their, I think, licenses, keep up with their certificates, they have to do a continuous education. And also technology is moving very fast, right? So definitely education is a key part to this whole equation. Now, so to sort of tie this down towards the end of our conversation here, I have a couple of questions. Have you considered any kind of blockchain or related technologies for securing data? That means if there is private data, how are you actually securing that data? What kind of steps are you taking for any kind of cyber attacks or cyber security related things on your platform currently?
No, I think that's a very, very, very good question, and especially given that it's healthcare. So, a couple of things that we have done is whenever we started, we kind of looked at Hipaa. So Hipaa compliance is something which is mandatory in the US, and a few forms of those aspects are coming into our region as well. So we worked on getting our application near Hipaa compliance. And we are also working with AWS, where we have created a HIPAA compliant kind of a server on which all these information, etc., these patient cases, etc., are being double encrypted, both from a doctor's perspective, the sending doctor and the receiving doctors. And one of the things that Hipaa ensures, and working through these servers, that even if Docquity tries to dig into some of this data, we leave an audit trail. And that's what helps us to kind of keep ourselves honest to this, to this compliance requirement. Now we are going for GDPR compliance as well, because of, we are slowly moving into the Turkey market, where we have to kind of look at GDPR as well. And essentially, and here in this region, we very strictly comply to the PDPA, or the PDPA Act. So our database, the way it's kind of structured is there in the individual countries, and only when the doctor is logging in will his information be pulled down to our application server, which is in Singapore. So that's how we have structured this. I think this is fundamental for any of the health tech company to look at. Any leakages here is going to be is an issue.
Is there a relevance to any machine learning or artificial intelligence on your network at the moment?
I think fundamentally, and this is something that we have been doing from day one. So all the open discussions that are happening on our platform, we have been learning, and we have actually created an algorithm. Sorry, let me take a step back. I think before I go in, as I mentioned, the core focus around the way we started Docquity was collaboration needs to result into some kind of an actionable insights that most of these doctors can use in their day-to-day practice, right? So what we have been doing, like all these 500, 600,000 cases that have been discussed on our platform, we are basically learning from them on the open area. We are actually learning from them, and we have created this proprietary Docquity clinical map. Essentially, what we are launching slowly, soft launch, is what we call as a DX engine, which is an AI-driven clinical search engine for doctors, wherein doctors could put in a few of these clinical presentations and they can get the diagnosis, how to diagnose, and what the other doctors have actually taught about. So think about it like a real-time second opinion tool available for the doctor directly when he's discussing with the patient. Internally, we call it as a medical Alexa. We have not yet got it to speak. We have got it to web browse, but the objective is to be able to create this kind of an assistant using all this data that we have been able to generate for the doctor, so that he gets an availability of the various lines of treatments that he needs to look at before suggesting a treatment to the doctor, and I think to the patient. Because I think clinical treatment is always thought about as clinical, but it's not just clinical, it's clinical plus economical. And not everybody can go in for a full-time chemotherapy, for example, or they can't go in for a full-time pacemaker. So we'll have to create effective ways to kind of address those situations as well.
Right. Well, I think, that brings us to the last question, and I think we're on dot to finish this off at 7 today. We had a fairly attentive audience. Everybody had great questions. As I always tell you, the whole idea of these booth webinars is I want to help people connect, even if it is that 1% that we are able to make that change. That's what I look for. It may not be mass, but at least the idea is to bring the community more closer, share more stories, learn from each other, stay connected, grow together, always reach out to another fellow boothie for any kind of help, any kind of suggestion, any kind of, the network is pretty amazing. And I think Kazuyuki also mentioned that the chairman is of Itochu is a close friend's uncle. So it's sort of, when we look at this is like the minimum 6 degrees of separation that we have, right? Our network is pretty powerful. Stay connected, stay safe. Thanks everybody. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you, Indranil, for sharing this amazing journey with us. And we look forward to, hold on, maybe let me see. Oh yeah, thanks so much. And I think everybody appreciates it. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll catch up with you again on our next session, which is coming up for next Tuesday, which is on the education sector. We've got Alpha and Sharam. So I'll send out more details to all of you. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thanks everybody. Good evening. Namaste.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care.